All right, welcome to this episode of the Small Bike Stuff podcast. This is the podcast where we explore the ins, the outs, the odysseys, the intricacies of all things small bikes. Myself, Callum, I'm here in New Zealand, and we also have...
I'm Dana, out here in Bangkok.
Yeah, so I'm sitting here on 13 degrees Celsius. It hasn't stopped raining for the last 8 hours here in New Zealand.
Slightly
what do you
warmer,
got?
slightly drier.
Yeah, man. I'm going to go ahead and say that we should swap, but you probably wouldn't want to, so
No.
I'll just put up with it. Today we're going to explore a topic that came to us purely because I caused an almost international, like, geopolitical incident from a YouTube video. So we're going to talk about Singapore and the wonders of Singapore, and specifically small bikes in Singapore. And why are we even talking about this? Long story short, last year I went to Singapore for a few days. Well, I was actually only there for like 27
1 day,
hours.
right? Like you have the bus like right away.
Yeah, I arrived at 10 p.m. at night. Went out, got food, went to bed, woke up in the morning. I think I left, by lunchtime. So I managed to film a video in that time and released it. And it was just going through a motorcycle park lineup, and it was like super interesting. There was a whole bunch of, I think I titled it, "Why are there so many of these Yamahas in Malaysia, in Singapore?" And
it was like 90% of the bikes, right?
It was 135 LCs, and I knew a little bit about the fact that Singapore has quite a lot of restrictions on vehicles and in daily life as well, and the way they run the place. So we'll kind of get into the ridiculous cost that it takes to own a bike or a vehicle in general over there. And we'll actually try get it accurate this time.
Because Singaporeans, leave your thoughts in the comments.
Yeah, please do. And hopefully I'm allowed to come into the country again. So I've been to Singapore a couple of times. My first trip was about 3 days, and the last trip was, less than 24 hours. When did you first go to Singapore, and what were your impressions?
Yes, I've been a handful of times. First time was 2004. My first trip to Asia, and I was actually going to Cambodia. And I had, like, very similar to your last experience, I had like about a day free in the country. On my flight from, I believe I flew Germany to Singapore, me and the girl sitting next to me hit it off, and she was Singaporean. And so I basically spent the day with her, seeing Singapore, if you will. And, had a great time. And this being 04, right? No messenger or anything. She gave me her email, and I left to Cambodia, lost her email, lost touch with her. But it would
have been a different place in 2004, man, like compared to now.
So I didn't get the nuance of it then, right? Yes. I was more focused on my host than seeing the country. And, I thought the food was, like, okay. Like, I had heard, like, the food was really good, but, like, I was only there for a day, like, 2 times or something, 3 times. And, like, nothing blew me away, but it was very clean. It was very modern, even then. And I didn't really get the same sense of, like, sort of stress and dystopia that I get when I visit now. So I've been now a handful of times. I've been there for tech conferences. I've been there when I filmed when I had my own show in Malaysia for EFM Network. We filmed in Singapore at one point. So I've spent extended periods of time there. Now I have multiple friends who are either A, Singaporean, or B, foreigners who have become permanent residents in Singapore. And the overwhelming sort of vibe I get from everyone is that, like, they all think, much like America, right? They think Singapore is like the greatest country in the world. Yes. Which it very well may be from a lot of metrics. But a lot of them feel incredibly stressed in daily life. And I got that impression. I had a job offer down there, and I went to spend a week with the CEO and with the team I was going to run for that company. And everyone was just stressed all the time. The work culture seemed very stressful. Like, they would just all go out and, like, just binge drink every night after work, and sort of like Groundhog Day, do it again, do it again, do it again. And I found that like really counterproductive to the lifestyle I've become accustomed to in Bangkok.
That's really interesting to get your perspective of things, and that because I kind of feel I had similar feelings, but about different things. My first impressions before I went was that it was this modern utopia. I'd watched a few Anthony Bourdain episodes where he'd been, I think maybe the latest one, where he's there and he's sitting down with some locals, and basically they're talking about how like Filipino maids and maids from Indonesia have kind of like empowered the entire country to be able to go out and work. And so like they've got a way high percentage of women in the workforce, which is really awesome. And you do notice that you see a lot of like everyone is out there working.
Yeah.
And that was another thing I noticed, is that everyone was out there working. You go to a food court, there's an 85-year-old guy wiping your tables, because if you don't have a family that's got enough kind of cash flow to look after you, especially the Singaporeans that have been, living there since, I'd say, like the early, like maybe the 1900s onwards kind of, like 1910, 20, 30, 40, 50, before World War II. Those kind of families that have been there forever, hopefully there's some kind of generational wealth, because it's an expensive country. And there was multiple times I saw really, really old people still having to work, whereas in New Zealand, they'd have their government-funded pension and they could have retired quite a while ago. But in equal facets, my first trip there was just before COVID. It was literally February 2020, before the entire world shut down. And the world was kind of not really 100% taking this thing seriously. It had been huge in Italy, I think, and China had a big decimation by it, but I was still traveling as if nothing was wrong. And then you went to Singapore, and there was thermal cameras everywhere, and much more so than Bangkok, and everyone had masks on, and everyone was very I think the whole opinion of everyone was there was like, we've been through SARS, we've been through other things, this will be nothing. And I was really impressed with the modern way that it worked. Then
Singapore is, if anything, modern.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, flying in there, you're looking out at their port. Their port is a major destination, and that's
they control the Strait of Malacca. Yeah.
Yeah, they do. And this led me, before I called you this today, to have a little bit of a look into their history. And sure enough, a company that I know a little bit about and have read about in my life before, the East India Trading Company, had a lot to do with basically. It was basically a company bought the island after leasing it off the one of the sultans, and even that was kind of like a bit of a contentious situation. They were trying to kind of get permission to look after it because they could turn it into a port. And
very British thing to do.
Yeah, there was a duke between different sultans that thought they both owned the area. So, of course, they back one that they liked better, and then like,
very British.
Yeah, we'll make a deal. And they paid him for 10 years a lease, and then eventually they just bought the island off him. So
to roll back on that, I've met a lot of Brits in Singapore who still feel like, oh, this is an extension of the empire. I heard one of them say, and like a really douchey thing to kind of throw out there. And a lot of like I've talked before about my impression of those types of people, so I'll leave it at that. But I think that their history is very interesting, but their progress, having a very young country.
Yeah.
And their progress as such is just absolutely stunning.
Yeah, the progress is really impressive, and the way they progressed as well is just entirely different to a lot of countries. So, the stuff I was talking about between the sultans and all those, that was like 1819 or 1820. So this is, a couple of hundred years ago now. Right in through to the early, I think it was the Suez Canal opened in the late 1800s, and so a whole bunch more shipping traffic ended up going past through the Malacca Strait and past Singapore. So that kind of really helped it. Next big historical event that changed and shaped the area would be World War II, where the Japanese came in and occupied it. There used to be a railway from Malacca in Malaysia all the way down to Singapore, and that was actually ripped up by the Japanese, and all those rails were put down on the bridge over the River Kwai at Hellfire Pass at the Kanchanaburi Railway there. So, it definitely entirely changed the landscape, and after World War II, I think the British kind of assumed that they'd just kind of get to jump back in there, but Singapore was definitely aiming to be their own thing. And long story short, they kind of achieved that. And there was one prime minister from 1960 something through till 1990.
Lee Kuan Yew, right?
That's it. And he's like the father of the nation. But
I was there when he died. I was in Singapore when he died.
Wow. Yeah, that would have been amazing. It's not the right word. It would have been a cultural shock.
Yeah. It was 2015, if I remember. Yeah. And I was there to ref fights, actually. I was going to Johor Bahru, and what happened was to get me and my the guys I was traveling with into Johor, they flew us to Singapore instead, and they were like, just cross the bridge, and it was like the Friday before like a long weekend, and what you see is like all these Malaysian domestic workers and like Filipinos waiting at immigration. I have a photo somewhere on my Facebook of me and my buddy John Nutt, and we're standing in the immigration line at I think it's like Forest something, the immigration, the train station where you cross over to Johor, and we're sitting there and we take a photo, and we're like 1.5 feet taller than anyone else in the line, and it's like one of these things is not like the other, like just two big white dudes like in line for immigration. But you get a sense of like this cultural divide. And then Johor Bahru is like this it's a very unique province or city in Malaysia, and you get this sort of like, it's like a little enclave outside of Singapore almost.
Singapore light.
Yeah, but it's still very it's still very Malaysian in a lot of ways.
Yes.
And I will say that, like, well, I know everyone always talks about the food being amazing in Singapore too, but like it's really not, especially when you compare to Malaysian food.
I had a specific point to bring up about the food, and that I saw a meme the other day, and it's that guy accepting award and like pulling the bird to everyone and like biting his medal and being like, yeah. And it's a guy with a Singapore shirt on. And he's, telling the Malaysian and the Thai people and everyone to fuck off because he thinks he's won.
Yeah.
And it turns out he's like 4th or 5th place. But he's like, I'm the best. Our food's the best. And it's. I mean, I was just looking at the population. They've got 5.7 million. That's very similar to New Zealand's population. It's a bit more than New Zealand, and they've got a very, very, very small landmass.
A tenth the size. Yeah.
I think, it's impossible for them to have to even, and this is going to be so, I think this might be the geopolitical incident. I think it's hard to sit there and claim that you have better food than the country beside you when essentially all the ethnicities in that country are virtually the same, and there's way more of them. So of course there's going to be more opportunities for better food to arise. That's the most politically correct way I can say that Malaysian food's better than Singaporean. So we'll see if I get cancelled or not.
Cancelled for sure.
Yeah, so I mean, if you go to Singapore these days, very clean. You're not allowed to throw rubbish. You're not allowed to litter. If you want to smoke cigarettes, you have to smoke cigarettes in a painted yellow box on the side of the road. You can't do that outside of those areas. No chewing gum. You physically can't buy chewing gum from the corner stores, and the cost is such a shock if you've come from other parts of Southeast Asia as well. If you've come from Thailand or Malaysia and you roll into a 7-Eleven or whatever they're called there, the family marts, and you get a bottle of water, you're now paying $4, $3 US compared to 50 cents US, about 35 minutes that way. So yeah, there's a massive, massive cost. And like rich, small places like Monaco, a lot of the labor comes
imported.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you say the population's about the same as New Zealand?
Yeah, they've got 5.7. We're just over 5.
So New Zealand, I just looked it up on MapFight. New Zealand is 378 times larger than Singapore.
Yeah.
So think
we're
about
spread
that.
Out, man.
They have a slightly bigger population, and you are 378 times bigger.
Yeah, it's
I bet you if we looked at their economy too, their economy is massive.
Yeah, I would say Singapore GDP would be versus New Zealand would be very interesting. What do we got? Yeah, Singapore GDP per capita is $93,400, and New Zealand is $42,400.
Double.
Double, yeah. So, there was like Singapore's just an interesting place, and part of me when I go there kind of wants to be able to have a lifestyle where I could just like spend months there. But
I
then
get
again,
after
I know
about 3-4 days, I'm like, I gotta go.
I know within 3 or 4 days I wouldn't. I would be kind of like running out of things to do.
Did you ride there?
No, I didn't ride at all. It was just I wasn't there for long enough. I've never ridden there. I've just used Grab taxis in the public transportation. Their subway system is really really good as well.
Not as good as Bangkok's.
Absolutely not, but it's better than Tauranga in here in New Zealand, which doesn't even have one. So I didn't really have a high bar to beat. The thing about going through that motorcycle park and the video that I took is that I was noticing that there was all these small Yamaha 135 LCs, small CC bikes. There was a few 250s. There was like 400cc was there was a couple of 400cc bikes, and that was quite weird for me because the 400cc category kind of fell out in New Zealand, and that doesn't matter to us anymore. That's a very Japanese thing. The JDM market, they've got a kind of specific tax system below 250cc, below 400cc, and then above. And it turns out Singapore's exactly the same. So they've got a below 250, below 400, and then above 400 tax system. And you can and you do see like Yamaha MT-09s and BMW 1250 GS big adventure bikes. But the reason I didn't see them in my video is because these were all the workers that were coming over the border, mostly, not all, but most of them were coming over the border from Malaysia. And all the number plates on the bikes were Malaysian plates. So if I had done a little bit more research before I went, I would have been able to just look at all the number plates, look at the prefixes at the start, and where everyone's from.
Yeah.
And most of them are from Johor Bahru, which is a big city just across the water there.
It's an interesting place. I've been like 5 times to Johor Bahru.
Yeah. It's a really interesting place. Why I got a bit of stick in the comments is because I was talking about how I think I just had the camera up there and I was half jaded. I was like a little bit jet lagged. I couldn't find a beer that night. I really wanted a beer and you just like couldn't get them. They were like, it was after midnight. They're just not for sale or something. And I was like, this sucks. So I went back and slept, woke up, went out and filmed in the morning, had some food. I'm just kind of feeling like subpar. And I was talking about how I think it's 12 years or 8 years. You have to buy a license to then be able to buy a bike. And everyone ridiculed me in the comments. So I've got the facts here. Would you like to hear what you have to do to get a motorcycle?
I would love to. But before we talk about that, though, I was just looking at MapFlight about Singapore.
Okay,
Iceberg A68 is 8.1 times larger than Singapore.
Okay, so there's icebergs larger than Singapore.
Yeah, okay. Now
That's
please
impressive.
Give me the facts about... I saw that. I was like, this is wild.
Yeah, this is crazy.
So give me the facts about bike ownership in Singapore.
Yeah, so this is kind of valid for both cars and bikes. You have to get what's called a COE, and it's a certificate of entitlement. And what this does is that entitles you or gives you the right to own a vehicle in Singapore. So your first step in New Zealand or Thailand, you want to buy a bike or a car, you go to the dealership or you go have a look at a used car lot or have a look on some secondhand listings and you go and look at the car you want and buy it.
You marry a local and send them to buy it.
Yes, yeah. I mean... In your case, it's worked really well. The first step in Singapore is to bid for a COE. So you can't just go buy one. You're not guaranteed a COE. You can bid for it. There's open bidding exercises conducted twice a month. So there's 2 small periods every month where they open this COE lottery. I don't know if they would call it a lottery, and you've got to bid for the right to be able to buy a vehicle. Before the start of each bidding exercise, the LTA, which I guess is their transport agency, they announce the quota of COEs available for each category. So they've got different categories. I imagine small motorcycles, bigger motorcycles, cars, really fancy supercars, cheap kind of budget cars. And you've got to bid within that category to try to get one, and you're up against however many people want to. So if you get it, woohoo, you've got a COE, and now you can roll up to a dealership and show them that you're allowed to physically buy the vehicle that you want to buy. So I just want people to kind of consider that for a second, that if you want to buy a vehicle in Singapore, you really got to have some foresight and some planning happening
I
to
remember
even
you
get the
telling
permission.
me, you told me at one point a lot of the cars and bikes that you get in New Zealand come from Singapore, right?
Yeah, we have not bikes, cars. So we have a lot of Singaporean imports, but it's generally like higher grade or like kind of luxury cars or mid-tier luxury cars. So you like mid-tier BMWs and Mercedes and things like that. European cars are definitely less common in New Zealand because we have such a healthy Japanese domestic market export system, and most new cars in New Zealand are Japanese brands. But yeah, there are quite a lot out there. A friend of mine bought an Aston Martin from Singapore, and there's always rumors about the cars from Singapore. Oh, don't buy it because it's had its air conditioning on full for its whole life, and the car's sat there like running for 3 or 4 times the amount of time it's actually spent driving. So the whole thing is that the engine's got a lot of run hours, but it hasn't actually got a lot of kilometers on it. Because people are sitting in traffic and stuff. But I didn't find the traffic to be as bad as expected there, and I think this is one of the big reasons for it, is that they're physically limiting the amount of vehicles that can go on the road.
Yeah.
So congratulations, Danny. You've got a 10-year period for your COE. So that means you've got permission to buy a vehicle now. You've got that vehicle. Cool. You've got 10 years to enjoy that vehicle.
Is the COE free? I mean, do I have to pay for it? How much is it?
No, you have to pay.
How much?
So it's different for different categories. But for example, if you end up wanting to buy a small motorcycle like a Yamaha Exciter 155, Exciter 155, like you've got, you're looking at about 15 to 20,000 US dollars. Yeah.
So
it doubles the price of the bikes or the vehicles.
No more. $15,000 US dollars to buy a $2,000 US dollar bike.
Yeah. And this is what that's going. That bit of information there. Please correct me in the comments here if you need to. That was coming from the comments of my video where someone said it's around about this much to get a normal small bike.
Damn.
So 10 years are up. You've had your bike for 10 years. It's now 2033.
Yeah.
Do you know what happens now?
I keep driving it illegally.
Yeah, that's literally not possible. They have number plate scanners, number plate recognition systems. You'd eventually kind of get pulled up somehow, some way, some form. But the police only have like really basic Toyota Corollas over there, and they all seem like quite old.
Yeah.
So I wonder if they have an exemption. But at the end of the 10-year COE period, you can either choose to deregister your vehicle or renew the COE by paying the prevailing quota premium for your vehicle category. So long story short, they figure out how old it is, what it's worth, and you probably have to pay about half as much as you did before, but it's still a significant amount. So if you see any vehicle older than 10 years in Singapore, like if you see a guy rolling around in a 2005 BMW 7 Series, he is an absolute baller. He's paid for that vehicle like 4 times now because every 10 years he's got to do this COE,
oh my God.
Which is absolutely insane.
That is insane.
Yeah, absolutely. You can renew it for 5 or 10 years, so you don't have to renew it for 10 years. So if you only want to, maybe you want to have the car for another 5 years, you could have a lower cost renewal if you wanted to.
Can you inherit them? Do you know?
I don't know. I really don't know. I would like to know. Maybe someone can tell us in the comments because that would be super interesting. And now that I know all this, I really want to just go on a car park mission of Singapore, travel the whole country, and try to find the oldest car we can, and be like, "How?
Yeah, there it is."
Yeah,
this is my thinking on this, though. I mean, I think it on one hand, right? It's kind of a double-edged sword. So on one hand, I think it's ridiculous. Like from a small bike perspective, if I were going to pay $15,000 US to buy a $2,000 US bike, like I would just get an apartment in Johor Bahru, register it in Malaysia, and drive it to Singapore every day.
That's wild. Yeah,
because that'd be cheaper. But on the other hand, right, this is the other side of that, and it is that you're maintaining a country's sort of ability to be in line no more than a decade behind the current fuel economy, emissions, and technology standards in the automotive industry. So,
and then really it does seem to help the traffic as well. I just wanted to say it really does seem to help the traffic.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things like we face as as Thailand enters the middle income gap now, and more people can afford a vehicle, and more people can afford a second vehicle, that you see just the traffic be insane in the city, where cars are just bumper to bumper. And like everyone has, it feels like everyone has a car, everyone can get a loan for a car, and it's a bit crazy. Whereas, if you think about it, like you said, New Zealand, where you don't have that density, or Singapore, where they're controlling the numbers, and we've got, like, you could never do like a 10-year lifespan on a vehicle here, because like the Songtel that brings me down my soy is going to be at least 60 years old. It's like a twin turbo diesel flatbed with like rows of seats in the back, right? And like you jump in that and you hear it spooling up as it pulls away, like
Thailand's attitude to vehicles, and I promise I won't get too distracted and we'll come back to Singapore, but the biggest thing that confused me about Thailand is the lack of care about classic vehicles and classic cars. No one really cares. There is, small cliques and stuff that do really enjoy them and celebrate the existence of them, but generally, you can pick up an old 1970s Toyota Corolla, which in New Zealand would be, 15 to 20,000 New Zealand dollars. You're paying 2,000 to 3,000 New Zealand dollars in Thailand, because people just like, ooh, it's old. I don't want it.
It depends on the vehicle altogether, right? So there's like anything VW is going to be like 10 times the cost it would be in New Zealand. And I have a buddy, my buddy Bruce, who's really into classics. He'll buy old stuff and restore it. And I met this guy, Pat, one time. He had this 3-wheel car out in front of his condo taking photos. I stopped and talked to him. He's got a whole collection of old vehicles. So there, like you said, there is a subculture, but that does not exist in Singapore, to your point.
I found the comment about the value that the guy was talking about here. So I may have overestimated it a little bit, but still it's shocking.
Okay.
So he said for Singapore, as per December, the cost of the COE is $12,500 Singaporean.
Oh,
so $12,500 Singaporean dollars for the permission to buy a motorcycle, and that's for a bike below 200cc. So you've got to pay $12,500 to get the permission. So he's saying it will cost around $18,000 to $20,000 Singaporean total. So the bike, it seems like the bike is, if you're getting a bike below 200cc, it seems like they're able to. I'm making it sound like it's cheap, but it's not. But they're paying $5,000 to $6,000 for a bike that's below 200cc Singaporean, and Singaporean and New Zealand currency is almost dollar for dollar. So it's actually quite interesting.
12,500 Sing is 9,249 USD.
So that's just the permission.
Yeah.
That's just the permission, and then you've got to buy the bike. So they're saying 20,000 Singaporean is not uncommon for the total cost of a bike.
What if I buy a Grom and I put a 250cc bore kit on it?
That's something I actually would like to know, because in New Zealand we have, depending on the age of your vehicle, if it's older than the year 2000, you need to get it inspected every 6 months at a safety center.
6 months.
If it's newer than the year 2000, then it's every 12 months. These rules came in when the year 2000 was only 10 years ago, and they haven't grandfathered the law in to be like a time period. So right now you can buy a car that's 24 years old almost, and you only have to get an inspection on it every 12 months, which is kind of dodgy, really, because chances are it's had a bit of a hard life. So I would like to run through a few of the other comments here, if you don't mind, and just kind of let you know the things that people were saying to me. Yeah, so one person said Singapore motorcycle licenses are capped at below 200cc, below 400cc, and above 400cc. So those are the three categories they have for motorcycle licenses. And because of that, you see a lot of 400cc versions of bikes, and one of the most popular bikes they have there is an inline 4-cylinder called the Honda CB400 Super 4.
Ooh.
So
I wish they had that in Thailand. I love that.
Yeah,
I love the Super 4.
Yeah, and it's an inline 4 sounds great. They just do.
They do.
I don't know about legal modifications in Singapore. I haven't even got into that yet, but it seems like there's a lot more variety in a completely different way.
Yeah.
I don't know what the secondhand market's like either. Like, it would be interesting trying to hey, if we either of us become multi-billionaires, let's go there and try buy a used motorcycle one day.
Yes, let's.
Yes. Yeah.
When we become multi-billionaires.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, so another guy's just commented on the COE with his own wording. He said, in Singapore, motorcycles and cars are taxed very heavily. This is the way our government controls the population of the vehicles in the country. To buy a brand new motorcycle, not only do we need to pay for the COE, which is currently averaged at around $13,000 for a digital paper. On top of that, the government also introduced an ARF tax scheme on motorcycles based on their open market value. For example, a motorcycle with an open market value of 10,000, we have to pay extra 50% tax. So it becomes 15,000. And big motorcycles with an open market value of 20,000, we have to pay an extra 100% tax. So it becomes $40,000. So what he's saying is, if you buy a bike that's meant to be 10,000, you've got to pay an extra 50% tax on top of that, as well as the permission to buy it. So that's where the double cost comes from. So if you're buying a brand new BMW, you're paying double the price of what it's worth, plus the permission to buy it is another $12,000.
So from a car perspective, as you know, here in Thailand, imported cars are taxed at 300-400%. So like that sort of lines up economically, but we don't have that upfront COE cost.
Yes.
I'm looking at the Super 4 right now.
Yeah. Is it not what you thought it was?
No, it is, because it looks exactly like the 1300 Super 4 that they sell here.
Yeah.
If we had a 400 Super 4, I'd be very tempted.
Yeah, it's a really, really cool bike. Another guy just said the current COE stands at $13,189, meaning a Grom 125 will cost approximately $20,000 Singaporean on the road. Welcome to Singapore, he said.
You've got to be a real enthusiast then to live in Singapore and want to own a small bike.
Yes, or alternatively to that, you've got no other option and you need a form of transport. You really are not going to be able to afford a vehicle. I talked to a guy who took me from the airport in a Grab taxi. So he came and picked me up at the airport and took me back. And I said to him, what do you do? Like, how much is fuel here? And he's like, I go over the border once a week and illegally fill up, because actually you're not allowed to fill up Singaporean plated cars in Johor Bahru because the fuel's so much cheaper. But he knows a few fuel stations that will, and he'll just go to them and fill up for a quarter of the cost, because fuel costs are supposedly quite a bit more as well. Oh, here we go. Vehicles are slapped with 8 different taxations on a single product: import tax, ARF, COE, which is what we've talked about. Then you've got standard registration, and then you've got a road tax. Then the ERP, which is their automated toll system. If you go look at my Singapore bike video, they've all got what looks like a big old clunky 90s Game Boy bolted to the handlebars.
Yeah.
That's the scanning system. Petrol tax. So he said it's $2.57 US a litre. So $9.73 per gallon.
That's like almost 3x the prices of here.
Yeah, that's crazy. And then you've got to pay GST, goods and services tax. So it's honestly really amazing.
Wow. So I imagine this is why electric scooters are so popular in Singapore as a transportation method, because it is just insanely expensive to own a small bike.
Cycling was huge as well, and not in a yes, there were people riding around dressed up in lycra cycling and getting fitness in, but just biking to and from somewhere is a very normal way to get somewhere if you're in the middle of the city. Say if you live, in an apartment that's 4 or 5 kilometers away from your workplace, you might as well jump on a bicycle and take it.
Yeah, so I mean, I know a bunch of people there who are very into like the electric scooter scene. And like I think that's their equivalent of the small bike scene, is because they don't have to pay these ridiculous, I don't want to say ridiculous, they don't want to have to pay these high taxes to own a small bike.
Yeah, it just doesn't. Sorry, Singapore. I think you're a cool place, but I'm gonna have to break up with you. Malaysia for life.
Yeah, right. Well, the food's
like
better.
If we're talking about buying bikes in that part of the world,
Yeah.
though, like just to quantify that, if you want to buy a bike as a foreigner in Malaysia, if you've got the right passport,
which you know a few things about.
Yeah, if you've got the right passport, you literally just turn up. They stamp you in the country for 3 months. You go to a motorcycle shop and say, that one, please.
Yeah.
And they take you to a local office. The office scans your passport. Don't even need your like physical driver's license from your home country. And boom, bike's in your name. You've got like a registration document with your name on it and the number plate, license plate written on it. And that's your bike now. And that can all happen within 24 hours.
Yeah. In Thailand, you could just show up to a local Samchai type of bike sale place. They might even have a plate hanging around in a box they could throw on the bike for you. Off you go.
Exactly. It's very much, it's because it's such a small place. There's not anywhere you can kind of, in parts of Thailand, in rural Thailand or rural Malaysia, you'll find places that people aren't keeping their registration tickets up to date, because it doesn't matter. You don't really get stopped. But in Singapore, it's just so small. I don't really think that's a thing. Although I didn't see anyone getting pulled over at all. Like in New Zealand, that's a normal thing. Police actively pull people over to the side of the road and will pursue them or ticket them.
They're probably electronically ticketing people in Singapore, I imagine. Like, bloop, there you go.
Yeah. So, I mean, this, I think that's kind of a real good summary of the existence of Singapore's motorcycle or vehicle scene. One thing I would like to add. One thing I would like to add is the only custom, in my lineup, I saw this custom looking bike that seemed to have like a Chinese engine in it, and it had just kind of been slapped together to look like a custom cafe racer. That was a brand called Mutt Motorcycles, MUTT. And Mutt Motorcycles, they seem to be selling like 200cc bikes for probably a reasonable-ish cost. They wanted me to go to the dealership and make a video for them, but I was not in Singapore anymore by the time I heard from them, so I never got around to it. And they seem to be in the UK as well, Mutt Motorcycles, but it's just like a cool, probably Chinese-made, assembled somewhere else.
It looks like very similar. I'm looking at them now. It looks very similar to the bikes we call Stallions here in
Centaur Stallions.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, so it's exactly the same engines, same bodies. Yeah,
that's as custom as it gets, man. Like that's kind of it. I went to a little motorcycle dealership a parts dealership in Singapore, and I asked them if they had a few different parts, and my bike was 6 years old at the time, and they just kind of didn't stock anything for those anymore. It was only for like the last 2 or 3 years of production that they held parts for.
Oh, there's another bike company here that looks exactly like this too, called GPX Thailand.
Yes, GPX, that's the one. Thailand, yeah.
Well, we have Stallions and we have GPX.
Yeah.
Stallions, not stallion. Stallions, plural.
Yeah. There's more than one. I don't know if there's much more we can really drag out of this topic. I think I would like to see everyone battle it out in the comments and tell us how wrong we were this time.
Yeah, I agree. I think, to me, having been to Singapore a few times, having spent a lot of time in Malaysia, I appreciate Singapore for what it is. However, I've noticed over the years, if I meet someone who's been to Singapore and oh, this is the greatest place ever, it's so perfect, that tells me all I need to know about them.
Yeah, absolutely. The old getting the ex-colonialist vibes.
Yeah.
Ooh. Is this what my forefathers felt like? Yeah, it is what it is, man. I mean, it's a place I definitely will go to again and will spend time in again. I mean, I'm transiting through there on my next trip. I did consider spending time there, but I've decided to actually spend the time that I would have devoted to Singapore. It's just going to be spent in Malaysia. So
you can't fly direct to KL from New Zealand?
You can, but for some reason, Malaysia Airlines in this current climate post-COVID seem to think they're like Emirates. Or Singapore. They're just charging like a wounded bull. A direct flight is significantly more.
Oh wow!
So yeah, it is what it is. But I think we'll call it here for the Singapore episode. And if you like this podcast or you're really interested in small bikes, this is definitely the place to come and watch them and learn about them and see us kind of create geopolitical issues around motorcycles. We can do anything you like. Dana also has a channel, Idea Studio BKK, and has more bike videos than you would expect for a place called Idea Studio, and they are really, really good. So please go and check them out. The next episode, I think we're going to be talking about when a small bike stops being a small bike.
Indeed.
Is it size? Is it CC related? What is it? But
size doesn't matter, Callum. Size doesn't matter. Oh, wait, we're talking about bikes.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. I swear. If you want to check out any more of this, there's a few more episodes. Go and watch the other episodes of our podcast. We've talked about a whole bunch of different stuff. The origin of the Honda Trail, and both of our long distance motorcycle trips. We kind of analyzed them piece by piece. So there's a lot out there. There's a lot more coming. We'll see you on the next episode. Thank you so much for watching this episode of the Small Bike Stuff podcast. We'll see you next time.